All right, hello everyone and welcome. It is Monday, February 20th, and we have entered the final stretch here in week 4. You have just finished out a successful round of week 3 assignments and turned those into me as of midnight Sunday. And we have one last round of submissions here in week 4 to discuss. So I have a couple of submissions from week 3. So we have 5 student submissions that we will take a listen to. So this afternoon we will start out with those. You've just finished your game composition for the Angry Bots project, and hopefully you were successful in building all of the music assets, understanding the project, determining how or your overall approach to the music, understanding the difference between the ambient and action cues, and how the stingers work together with the action cues. Hopefully you've had a chance to put the music in the game and test it out and to see how everything looks and works together. So we are going to take a listen to these 5 submissions, and then after that we will get into, let's see here, let me move this out of the way. We will get into the new week 4 assignments. So we have the sound design and the final game captures and the composition description for Angry Bots to talk about. So of course, after the discussion of the week 3 submissions, we will get into the new week 4 assignments. So please let me know if you have any questions as we go along, or if you're viewing this over the archive. We have one last week here to discuss any sort of issues that you have in the class, whether it is with the assignments or maybe a technical aspect, either with your computer or the games or the software, or making everything run together, making your music and sound effects work in the game. Make sure that you reach out and address any issues that you might have in this final week, so that we can get everything wrapped up for you, and make sure that you come through the class with the games, your music, your custom music and sound effects working with your projects, and you have something to show off for all the work that you put into each one of the projects. So that is our goal in the last week. So let's jump back over here, back to Logic. Let's see, that's not the right project. How about this? And we will discuss our week 3 submissions. I will start with an overview of all of the projects and just kind of give an idea or insight into what we are listening for. And then we will go through one at a time to discuss them individually. So our new game this week, you've now had the opportunity to play the game and listen to the examples and check out how the music is going to operate, and hopefully you were pleased when you placed all of the music in the game and everything worked hopefully as intended, or at least pretty darn close to it, or it was obvious where the issues might be. So a lot of times the first round that you put the music in, it may not operate as expected, and so it takes a bit of back and forth to make sure everything loops right and transitions correctly and sounds as seamless as possible. So we have we have 5 student submissions, so 5 tracks here. Each we have different columns here. Over here are all of the ambient cues. These are all of the action cues, and over here are all of the stinger cues. So we will start by listening to the ambient cues, and then we'll jump over to the rest of them. So the ambient cues are loops. Actually, the ambient loops are meant to loop. They are meant to set up. They are set up so that when they reach the end of the file, they need to return back to the top and make sense both musically, melodically, harmonically. The mix makes sense. Having a consistent key and tempo without strong shifts and changes anywhere, so that as it returns back to the front of the file, it makes musical sense. In this ambient cue, we talked about it. The ambient cue is going to be one of the main pieces of music that is heard during gameplay. Probably most often. That is why it's the longest file at a minute or a minute or two long. There should be development and change through this ambient cue. We don't want it to just state one idea in the beginning and not really shift that far away from it, whether it's adding new instrumentation, adding and removing instruments over the course of the cue, working with different production tricks, different effects that change through the mix. Whether it is your progression and maybe you have a melody and harmony and rhythm progression. Maybe you focus or rely more on the idea of musical sound design, taking your musical instruments and using them in a more of a texture soundscape sort of direction. Hopefully we'll hear a couple of different examples of that. So the ambient cue will have change and development. It needs to have enough instrumentation that it stands on its own, so that often means that there's a little bit of rhythm, often a lot of low bass and power to the cue through the different synths and layers, and then maybe a little bit of not necessarily a full melody across the entire minute cue, but different elements in the higher ranges that kind of balance all of the power in the low end and create a bit of change and development through that cue. Overall, looking at each one of these, it looks like they are mostly set up to loop, where the end of the file, there's no big or gap or change moving back to the front of the file. The waveforms of these two files are a bit concerning. This one just looks like a solid 2x4 all the way across. Looks like there was probably a limiter heavily used across the entire mix, and there are no dynamic changes. This one looks very, very low. I would bet if I zoomed way in on that waveform, I might be able to see a little bit of that, but so there is something there overall, but this needs a whole lot more volume through that cue to compete with the rest of the sound effects in it's a pretty loud game overall. So that's what we are listening for through the ambient cues. Now, one of the compositionally, one of the larger aspects that we're paying attention to is the change in intensity and tension as you go back and forth between the ambient and the action cues. The ambient cue should have instrumentation and power. It should have can have rhythm and bass and harmony and melody, and have elements of the full composition. So it can be big and strong just as long as the action cue is even louder and stronger and more powerful than that. So we're really listening for the intensity difference between the ambient and the action cues. Looking at the action cues, they need to loop also, just like the ambient cue. So all of these are set up to loop. Just noticing the volume and the mix of these two sets of cues are off again, both for the action cues. These look like they are not 8 bars long. Maybe this one is, but the spider and the buzzer look like they are at an incorrect length. The rest of these files look pretty good overall in level and mix, and they look like they are set up to loop. So compositionally, each action cue represents a different robot, and the instrumentation and the progression, the motif that you put forward in that audio file should represent that robot and becomes the theme of that robot, so that even if that character is off screen, the main player should be able to identify who's coming after them. So again, however big and loud the ambient cue is, the action cue just needs to be the bigger and louder than that. It's going to be the strongest, most powerful set of cues in the mix. Full drums, kicks, snares, powerful rhythms, big bass lines, lead melodic line. Now you have 8 bars to work with. It's a much better place to get a kind of a motif or a phrase going that represents that particular cue. So a strong lead line that plays against the rest of the powerful instruments. You have an opportunity for more change and variation between the different action cues. So where with a 2D platformer, as we were doing main loop 1, 2, and 3, you had to use consistency across all of the files in your 2D platformer composition so that it felt like the same band, same orchestra was playing that piece of music. Here, each set of instruments or each cue represents a different robot, which allows you for a lot more variation in the instrumentation from one cue to the next. So strong loops, strong music, 8 bars long. Those are most of the parameters that we're listening for in these action cues. And over here, the stinger cues. These are going to play at the exact same time the action cues are triggered. So they need to have a strong impact at the front and fade out quite quickly to silence. So these files, they look like they are the correct shape, where they hit hard and then fade to silence. These are noticeably set up correctly, where they have a strong impact and reach silence quite quickly. These look like they don't end. They're going to get cut off at the end of the file. So you want to make sure that they reach silence. These also look too low in volume. This first one looks like it's getting heading in the right direction. It may get cut off at the end, and these don't seem like they're strong enough in volume to compete with the other files. So that should be good. Just another little point, maybe it depends on the tail of each one of these files. If there's reverb or cymbal crash, we'll actually listen to it. But if you need to edit them down, they actually do reach silence and are just sitting there for a second or so. You can certainly cut down the ends of these files. That is, obviously, if it's still making noise, leave the file as is. All right. I think that's what we need to discuss overall for each one of these. Let's go ahead and take a listen to them one at a time. We'll start with the ambient cues and then jump around between the action and the stinger files. What else? All right, let's start with this ambient cue. So we have a little bit of rhythm in there. We got a couple of good layers of synths playing. Right about where I was thinking there was a change that was introduced. So we have a kind of a lead line that develops through the second part here. Now, it should probably go away here in the very end of the cue. So that would be my only suggestion here, is that there's a good change, right? There it goes. Okay, so there's a good change in the progression. Added in a new instrument layer. So I would just, I don't know, in the last third of this piece of music, probably return to something similar to this, so that you create an ending for this synth lead line rather than it just getting cut off here at the end. So whatever you introduce over the course of the cue should probably be taken away. Typically, you only need to do it right at the very end, so that when it returns back around, it's even with the front. All right, let's jump over to the action cues. Here's the buzzer action. Cool. Good change from one to the next. Very good. Nice changes, as mentioned. Changes in the instrumentation, changes in the progression from the buzzer to mech to the spider cue. The main suggestion would be maybe a little bit more change in the second half of each one of these cues. Once you've stated the idea, in the first half, it primarily repeats in the second half. I do like the rhythmic change, kind of triple feel through the spider cue. And an appropriate energy from the ambient to the action cues. Over here in the stinger cues. Cool. I think I like the third one the best. It kind of lasts a little bit longer. A little bit of that reverb tail. And I'm just going to try playing these against the main files. Maybe. Just to make sure that they are heard easily against the main loops. Or, sorry, the action cues. Okay. This one gets lost a little bit. And you'd have to balance out the volume a bit more so that those stingers can be easily heard against the action cues. So I think the first and the third one work the best. Maybe work a little bit more on the second one. All right, very cool. Good stuff to start with. Let's jump to the next one here. All right, I'm going to turn this down. See what happens. All right, I'm missing all the low end, missing all of the bottom half of the mix. Got some interesting synths there. They just sound like they're really pushed very hard against a compressor and a limiter on the master. Everything's kind of squashed in there. Repeating phrasing, but they're not kind of repeating together in a kind of a rhythmic phrase that repeats around and around. Maybe drums in like a kick and a snare pattern will help bring a bit of that rhythm in there. Yeah, you can hear the compressor kind of pumping and breathing. So I think you have some good ideas in there, but a lot of the layers are squished together. Let's see if there's any low end in the action cues. Yeah, lots of confusing layers playing together. Lots of dissonance. I need a strong kick and snare pattern. It's there. It also feels like it's sped up. Missing the low end. Sounds like there's some interesting ideas in there, but it really needs to be pulled against a strong metronome. Watch all of the looping of the files. Watch the overall mix. Let's check out the stingers. These definitely need to hit silence. Alright, those are a couple of synth notes overall. They need to be strong impacts. Hard hits, musical impacts that have a strong attack and fade to silence. And these, I think, are going to be the opposite, where I won't be able to hear them very well. Let's see. Let's check this out. Now, this might be a case where listening in your studio or on headphones, it's at a comfortable volume, where the level of your laptop or your interface was quite loud, but the actual waveforms and the bounce of everything creates a small output. So let's see. Let's check these out. It might be difficult to... Oh, let's see. Where's my gain? All right, so of what I can hear at this point, it does seem like you've got some low-end bass layers, kind of a harp playing. So maybe try introducing a couple of different layers over the course of the cue. It sounds like once those initial ideas are in place, there might not be much change other than the progression through the cue. Let's jump over to the action cues. Okay, there's a little more volume from those. Make sure they're cut down to 8 bars, which would be about there. So, needs more energy, needs more action, needs more volume, needs more intensity. Let's jump to the next one. Alright, just the minor seconds going back and forth. Need more variation through the cues. Lead lines. More intense instrumentation. Like here you need a kick snare pattern. So there are changes in the instrumentation from one to the next, but I think you just need more of everything. More instruments, more volume in each one of the cues, more power. These are a little bit better. Alright, same sort of idea. These sound like 3 sound effects. Or individual synth notes. So add an impact, add a kick, add a strong attack at the front to allow them those are going to kind of get lost in the rest of the mix when you're playing the ambient and the action. Those will, well, I mean, they're actually the strongest volume, so they'll probably be heard against the action cues. But you need to make sure that their content is not going to get lost against. Once you do bounce these files with a stronger volume, you want to make sure that these are can be heard, and adding a bit of percussion in there will help the attack of those stinger cues. All right, let's go to the next one here. Let's do this. Zoom back out and try this one. Looks like an appropriate volume. Looks like everything is set up. I'm going to turn this down. Some nice lush pads there. A little bit of percussion in the back. Strong brass lead line. Strong tension and release. Set it to loop properly. I think the ambient works very well with all of the dense layers. There's some good changes over the course of the cue. There's thematic ideas that are kind of introduced and removed. And there's a constant a bit of percussion in the background, moving it forward. All right, let's jump over to the action cues. So a couple of things that I noticed listening. Keeping it strictly orchestral is going to create some challenges in defining each one of these cues. So I think that you need a stronger kind of attack and punch to the mix of these instruments so that you can get I think it might be maybe a bit of a wash in the reverb or the length of some of the notes. Trying to get a stronger kind of bite or attack to the instruments so that it kind of feels like you're missing the clock or the kick snare kind of a metronome of the music, where if you brought out the staccato ostinato part with the strings and tightened up, probably took back some reverb so that you could get more attack of the instruments, then you're also going to have to introduce more change from one cue to the next so that it becomes identifiable in all of the action that is going on during gameplay. You want to make sure that the player can very easily identify which robot is coming for them. And when everything's strictly orchestral and you're using all of the instrument families in each one of the cues, you have to create something that creates a bit more disparity between the different cues, whether it's the choice and the use of the orchestration, the instruments that you're choosing to use in any one of the cues, or if it is more compositionally, where I do like what the spider cue is doing, where you have longer phrases and changes. If you can, this I would say is a bit more identifiable or separate than the difference between these two. So maybe you focus on the ostinato strings in one, you focus on the brass in the other, you introduce other percussion elements, or you work with the different groups to create a bit more of variation between the different cues. Compositionally, what you're doing and the direction that you're headed, I think, and the quality of the instruments that you're using definitely lends to a good direction overall. So just a few tweaks to each one of those to make it more appropriate to the different robots. Stingers. Right. Great sounds in each one of them. This is more the kind of big bass drum cymbal crash. I would say this is big drum and crash with some interesting effects also. Sounds like a kind of a sweep. And this one probably could also use some low end, a big hit on the front. But all three of those should stick out nicely against the orchestral instruments. All right. Good changes in each one of these. Let's see. Let's try one more. And, all right, one more ambient cue. For the loop. Alright, so there's good changes that are introduced over the course of the cue, but I'd say you need to make sure that you wrap everything up before it loops around, which it does. It gets close to it by the end, but some of these layers, so the kicks and snares get added here. Maybe some other changes to the progression, like once the instrument is added, it really doesn't change. So like this arpeggio is a good, or like arpeggiator kind of pattern here is a good change, but it never really changes once it's introduced. And then everything falls out of the mix somewhere over here. So it'd be better if you brought those layers out one at a time and make sure that where the instruments start here is where they end over here. Still sounds like there's something that's cut out when it loops around. So a little bit more in the kind of the rise and fall of the instrumentation through that cue than the action cues. All right, good energy. So you set the bar pretty high in the buzzer action cue. You had a really good lead line, a good kind of riff going through this one. Then the mech and the spider doesn't have the same kind of strong feeling. Definitely add another catchy lead line to the mech cue. I was going to say the same thing about the spider. It does feel like there is something going on in the spider cue. But it sounds very like bandpassed and very filtered, so it kind of is harder to pick out as the lead line. So definitely head in the direction that you were going with the buzzer action cue. So the three stingers, these two look like they're going to be too low in volume. Let's start here on the first one. All right, that's like an 808 drop. So that could be a layer overall, but definitely needs more elements. Yeah, these sound like elements of a drum kit. So make sure you add in elements of a bass, maybe a bass drop, big drums, and cymbal crashes always work, and then some sort of synth or bass or some sort of modulation, whether it's through instrument or effects for the end of each one of the stinger cues. All right, so good examples. Good things to talk about. All sorts of different things to address and to think about, and things to take into account between the ambient, the action, and the stinger cues. If you have any questions about this composition or the grade sheets or the comments or the feedback or anything, as always, please let me know, and we can address any of that. Okay, so good way to start out. Let's get into the new assignments for week 4. And your assignments here are to finish out the Angry Bots composition, the Angry Bots sound effects, and all of the production of it. If you need to do another pass at the composition for Angry Bots, if you're doing the sound design, the game capture, and we will also talk about the game composition description. So let's start here. So, as I was looking through FSO over the weekend, late into the weekend, I noticed that this assignment had actually been open through the previous week, and the deadline was going to close too soon. So I did change the deadline for this assignment. I apologize for any confusion of having this assignment open and available, but a lot of people did get the jump on this one, and if you need to change anything or update anything after we discuss the assignment, please let me know, or you can resubmit anything that you need to FSO. But you are going to do the sound design for Angry Bots, which this time entails the 22 sound effects necessary for this game. So when you download this assignment, you get to this PDF, very similar. The entire design process is quite similar to what you did in 2D Platformer, where in that assignment, a lot of the sounds could be done with your voice. This one has a lot of very interesting opportunity for sound effects and sound design with the robots and lots of explosions and weapons and computers and automatic sci-fi sliding doors and all sorts of different stuff. So let's take a moment to discuss the types of sound effects and point out a few things about each one of them. Again, you can use the Westar Music Library and freesound.org as great resources for different types of sounds. A lot of explosions out there. I don't expect you to go blow anything up or crash your car to make robot sounds. So using for some of these larger sound effects, I do suggest using the great sound effects libraries that you can find and get access to there. So while working on this assignment, I would suggest that you import the original sound effects from the game and use those to help you in your own design. So let me go get a copy of the game itself. Hold on just a moment. You can access the original sound effects. Hold on. You can access them in a copy of the game. So let's get to some desktop here. Come on. Here is Angry Bots. Or here is Angry Bots. And okay. And where did logic go? There it is. So, to get access to the original sound effects, I would find your game application, right-click on it, and you can choose Show Package Contents. And it gives you a folder appropriately named Contents. You can double-click on Contents and go to Data. Inside of Data, you'll find Streaming Assets. Inside Streaming Assets, you're going to find Music and Sound Effects. So if you go into the sound effects folder, you will find all of the original WAV files that you hear in the game. And then in Logic, you can take all of those sound effects and just drag them onto a track. Place all the files on one track so that they'll all be lined up next to each other. And now you can use these files as a guide for your own sound design. And then I would create a couple of blank tracks right below that. And you can easily find your own sound effects and build your own sounds. Let me go back over here. There we go. And here. So there are screenshots of each one of the sounds, just to give you an indication of what you're listening for, with their file names. And eventually, down here, there is the asset list. And it shows you the names of all of the files and how they need to be set up in the game. So let's go ahead and listen to these sounds. And I'll just point out a few things that we need to pay attention to. I think I might need to turn down my audio here just to make sure that these aren't too loud. All right, I think that'll turn things. Let's see, does that work? Check, check, check. Check. Does that turn me down? No. Where's my volume? Check, check. All right. Let's give this a try. And when you are going through all of the sound effects, I would suggest that you find groups of effects and work on them together. Meaning there are a lot of explosions in this game, and there are also a lot of doors in this game. So if you can go off and find groups of sounds, and then come back and edit them together, you're probably going to work a bit more efficiently overall. As opposed to saying, okay, here's airlock door close, and maybe you went out and found the perfect sound, came back, edited it, and name it. Then you moved on to airlock door, and then you went out, found the perfect sound, edited it, and name it. That's a pretty slow way of addressing the sounds one at a time. Better to go and find all of the doors that you'll need to create, and then go find all of the explosions that you'll need to create, and work on those in groups so that you can go off and search out similar types of sounds for quite a while, then bring them back and reconfigure them to make your own sound effects. So, starting with the doors, airlock doors open and close. These are the big circular doors that open up and kind of roll out of the way. Here's the open. Here's the close. A lot of times you can get away with the close being the reverse of the open, or at least a big element of it. Sometimes you need a ka-chunk as it hits and actually closes and locks right at the end, but start by maybe reversing the sound to get your opens and close. Your exterior rain. It's a rain sample. Make it looping. Interior hum. This is when you cross through the doors, you go inside. Mostly room tone. A lot of it could be like a spaceship kind of sound. A futuristic robot factory hum. Now, lots of different explosions. Each one of the robots has at least one explosion when it's destroyed. Flying buzzer, destroyed explosion. The flying buzzer, when it zaps you, it kind of shoots out a lightning bolt and attacks. The patrol mech. The mech and the spider have an alert sound when they notice you, because they don't have to. They can spot you from a distance, so it's kind of just a techie alert sound. Destroyed explosion. This is a massive explosion when the patrol mech, the kind of big boss robot, is destroyed. Really, really big, very long file. Patrol mech footsteps as it's walking around, left foot and right foot. I think they kind of cheated and actually put the same sound in both left foot and right foot. So you probably make them a little bit different from one to the next, maybe a little pitch shift or different type of sound. Missile explosion. This is when the mech shoots its missiles at you and miss it. Well, I think it actually plays the sound too when it hits you, but when it hits an object and explodes. Shoot missile. Then we have the spider sounds. This is when the spider wakes up and alerts. Kind of a beep there. Destroyed explosion. This is when you shoot and destroy the spider. Proximity. Now, this proximity is as the spiders get closer and closer to you, they beep, and the beep gets faster and faster. So you need to make sure that this is a very short, just beep sound, or at least a very short sound that can repeat a whole lot as it gets closer. So even though you hear it as beep, 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 it really is just one sound that the game controls how quickly it's played back. Enemy, spider, self-destruct. So if it gets close enough to you and explodes on its own, I think this is kind of a bad sound. It's kind of a wimpy explosion sound. Interior door. These are the sliding doors that open and close. Right, so that's open and close. Maybe a pneumatic or sound. Servos can work. Whatever. Maybe hydraulic sounds. The different types of pumps and engines and servos and motors can kind of get you some of that sound every once in a while. Locked door opening. That is sort of a hum there, but when you hack one of the computers and there's a red line on the ground, and then you hack the computer and it turns green and it leads you to where the door is, that is when the door opens and kind of allows you into the next part of the game. Player hit when you take damage. Player shooting. So this is the weapon, and actually jumping back to logic here, I would suggest that you follow, where are they? Here's the weapon, here's the shooting. I would suggest that you follow this very closely because I'm pretty sure that the timing of these shots match up with the timing of the muzzle flashes in the animation of the weapon. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 shots through here, evenly spaced, so that it creates a nice loop. Then whenever the player hits their mouse button, turns that loop on, plays it for as long as they hold the mouse button, they let go and it turns it off. So you should probably follow that wave file pretty closely when creating your own. What else? And then terminal hacked. There they have some pretty generic computer sounds. I've heard some really good stuff where somebody makes a computer voice that says terminal hacked and has a whole bunch of reverb on it and sounds really cool. So you can explore different ways and approaches to all of these sounds. Go ahead and create all of the sounds and put them in the game and test them out and see how well they work. Make sure that you you edit them quite close so that there's not really a gap at the beginning and they end, well, they don't get cut off. You want to make sure they go all the way to silence, but then don't have a really long waveform that has a whole bunch of silence at the end. So make sure that where'd it go? Make sure that you use the logic session. You can just create your own and then import all of the original sound effects in there. You probably want to space these out a bit so that you don't make yourself crazy with all the small files. But build your own files below all of that and bounce them out and format them and turn them in on FSO. All right, what's next? So you have the composition description for your Angry Bots composition. As we round out the month here, you're going to turn in all of your final materials and provide any information about your composition. So you will turn in your files again. If you make any updates or changes to your music, you can resubmit those files. You will be doing a video capture just like you did of 2D Platformer in a separate assignment on FSO, and so you will upload that to YouTube and share it here. You will create a screenshot of your production session and submit that. Then there is create screenshots of each one of your cues, including all of the instrumentation, listing out all of the instruments that you used. So you'll bounce your ambient cue, and then you'll re-import it either into the same Logic session or into a brand new Logic session. Listen to your files, double check the bounces, make sure they're formatted properly, they're named properly, they're the correct waveform, that it's a nice bounce with a full volume, and everything visually looks correct. You listen to it, it audibly sounds correct. And then create screenshots. You'll create a screenshot of your ambient cue, create screenshots of each one of your action cues. Then each time listing all of the instrumentation that you used. If you use different instruments in the different mech, spider, and buzzer cues, then list out the different instruments that were used. Same thing, provide screenshots of your stingers. Create a screenshot, then list out the instruments or the sounds or the sources that you used for those. Give me information, what key are you in? What was the chord progression, the difference between ambient and action cues? List out the ambient, list out the action cues. What is the tempo, time signature for your composition? Then you're going to set your files up so that you have 3 different examples. You're going to have the ambient cue going into the action cue, and you'll put one of the stingers with that. You'll then set up the ambient cue going into the mech cue, and you'll set up a stinger there. Ambient cue going into the spider action cue, you'll set up another stinger there, and listen to each one of these. Listen to how they change and transition. Let's pay attention to the volume. Obviously, it's going to be a sudden transition as it goes from ambient to action. How does the stinger help? Does it cover and mask and the transition a bit as it moves from one to the next? So it says, listen to each track and how the music transitions. Describe what you hear. So you'll provide screenshots. Most of this is re-importing your music back into, it's probably easiest just to use a blank session so that you can move the files all over the place. You bounce everything out, you bring it back in, and then check it. Look at the wave files, look at the, listen to everything, listen to the looping, match all the files up, and see how it will actually play back in the game, and make sure that everything is set up correctly. Then you'll give me a screenshot of the mix, play like the loudest part of your song or your composition, and give me a screenshot and make sure that everything is playing back nicely. All right, so that will get you set up with the composition description. Basically, it's providing me with some information about your composition and kind of its final version. You've done the composition, you've done the sound design for it, you've done any revisions and changes if necessary, you've bounced out all of the files and double-checked them, you've put them into the game and checked them again and in the kind of the interactive actual way they're going to play back, and then you create a video capture of everything to show it off and to show your work playing back correctly. And that is the final assignment for the class and for the month. Where is it? Here you're going to take a copy of your what is this? Nope, I did that. Sorry, hold on. You're going to take a copy of the video captures that you've done for 2D Platformer and Angry Bots. If you needed to make any changes to them, any kind of final version of them, and create one last version of it, you'll upload those to YouTube and then post them up here on FSO. This is a discussion post, so everybody can share them and check out everybody's work, see what the final version that everybody came up with of their projects. So it's a great place to show off your work and get some comments, comment on other people's posts, and just see all of the different approaches. The great thing about these projects is that you will see all sorts of different ideas and different approaches to how people went about this project. So definitely, I would often say that your videos are going to be one of the best resources that you have to show off your work. These games, the Mac applications, they are yours to share and download and distribute. So if you want to zip them up and put them on Dropbox and share a Dropbox link, or put them on your website and share those around, that's always good. But they are a Mac application, and you're not always guaranteed that that application is going to work. Well, number one, it doesn't work on, only works on Mac computers. And there's no guarantee that in a year or 5 or 10 years from now, with different operating systems and different computers, that that game is always going to work. But a really strong video, a capture of your music working in the game, especially if you post it up on YouTube and you put it up on your website, and that stuff sticks around for quite a long time. And a video is always going to play. You have the actual video file, you host it up on a website, then you can link people to the video. If they actually want to check it out, they know they have the computer, they can download the actual game application. So you have the project itself, the game, the real game application, and a video representation of it. The real purpose of the class overall is to give you projects to work on, to give you a sense of if this is the type of work that you want to go into. So a real big goal is to have your music and sound effects working in the game. So creating a strong video capture, really for this assignment, the main thing that I'm focused on is that you show off your music and sound effects in a way that kind of best demonstrates the work that you've done. So it's most important that the actual video capture works, that you're using the application like Loopback to be able to capture audio that's internal inside of your computer. So you can check out the, where is it? You can check out the original 2D platformer document for doing the game capture. If you need a refresher on how to set up the game capture, but you're going to use QuickTime and the Loopback application to capture digitally the video and the audio to be able to create a quality game capture. Then you want to try to make it either full screen or just capture the game window, have no other distractions going on, and show off your music in the best way. I'm not going to be counting to make sure that all of the different cues are played back, but I'm really looking for a quality representation of the work that you put into it. So 60 seconds, 90 seconds should be time enough to do the video capture in that length, and post them up on YouTube so that they're easily shareable. People are really lazy on the internet, even clicking and waiting to download a movie file. If they could just click and open and load up a YouTube link or a SoundCloud link or whatever it is, people are going to respond much better to that for a demo. All right, so doing the video capture should be very much the same as the previous round. Just make sure you give yourself enough time to upload everything and share the link properly, and then take the time to check out everybody else's projects. Give some feedback, give some critique, and see what everybody else was up to. All right, so that will end out the assignments for the class and end out our first class of the week. If you have any questions, show up on Wednesday and we can discuss any aspect of the assignments that you're working on. But as a whole, the class is set up to introduce you to this side of the industry, to show you that your music is just as viable in a video game as it is in any other format, to give you access to these types of projects and to give you insight as to what it's like to work as a music composer on a game project, to give you a sense of whether or not you would enjoy this type of work. If the opportunity presents itself, you will understand what's involved in working and doing the music and sound design for a game project, just to give you kind of a little intro idea as to how this might work. So if you have any questions or you want more information on how to get started and other resources involved in learning more about the audio industry for audio for games, please let me know. Reach out. We can set up a time to meet and discuss any aspect that you would like to learn further. Other than that, we'll round it out. I'll be available on Friday. Sorry, not Friday. Well, I will be available on Friday, but on Wednesday, we'll set up another go-to training, kind of an open session. So if you have any questions on any of the your assignments in this last week or any of the final ideas for the month, you can show up and ask any questions that you have. And other than that, reach out and let me know if you have any questions about the class. All right, thank you very much. I'll see you on Wednesday.